In the 19th century, the great Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoyevsky warned his fellow countrymen of the incredible danger atheism poses to individuals in particular and to humanity in general. If one takes the time to read Dostoyevsky's novels, then one notices an interesting pattern surface from the pages of this magnificent Russian writer. Some of the atheists appearing in the novels are thieves, murderers, and cunning liars. Others, though very intelligent, go insane, while still others end up committing suicide in the face of their meaningless and hopeless lives. All of them, despite their ultimate end in these novels, adhere to the fundamental principle necessarily deduced from atheism. If God does not exist, then everything is permitted. In other words, if the Bible is to be rejected, if there is no omnipotent God, no omniscient being who will require all men to give an account for their every action in life, no eternal judge who will not permit the wicked to go unpunished, then there cannot be an objective moral standard all must adhere to. If atheism is to be embraced, then right and wrong will be determined arbitrarily by those who are smart enough or powerful enough to cast dominion over their fellow man. Consider Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The protagonist is an atheist named Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. The troubled young Raskolnikov despises a wealthy and cruel old woman. Turning from an objective Christian morality, adopting the godless ethical theory of act utilitarianism, Raskolnikov begins to rationalize the murder of this old woman. And I quote, "On one side we have a stupid, senseless, worthless, spiteful, ailing, horrid old woman, not simply useless, but doing actual mischief, who has not an idea what she is living for herself, and who will die in a day or two in any case. On the other side, fresh young lives thrown away for want of help and by thousands on every side. 100,000 good deeds could be done and helped on that old woman's money, which will be buried in a monastery. Kill her, take her money, and with the help of it devote oneself to the service of humanity and the good of all. What do you think? Would not one tiny crime be wiped out by thousands of good deeds? For one life, thousands would be saved from corruption and decay. One death and 100 lives in exchange. It's simple arithmetic." End quote. Crime and Punishment, Part 1, Chapter 6. Notice Raskolnikov does not once consider biblical morality in this train of thought. He does not consider all people to be equally important in God's sight. God does not exist in his ethical considerations. Thus, murder is a permissible means to accomplish his desired goal. The ethical consequentialism of Raskolnikov has a most deadly result for the unsuspecting old woman, and many unforeseen results for Raskolnikov and those connected to him. Another example of this atheist maxim and the devastation it necessarily brings with it can be found in Dostoyevsky's magnum opus. In Dostoyevsky's greatest novel, The Brothers Karamazov, completed in November of 1880, the evil genius and antagonist of that book is the atheist Pavel Fyodorovich Smernikov. He is cunning and vengeful, reminding us of the mentality of communist dictator Joseph Stalin, which lay just over the Russian horizon. Smernikov, in an act of revenge, murders his real father, Fyodor Karamazov, then blames the murder on his half-brother, Dmitry Karamazov. Despite taking his revenge, stealing a considerable amount of money, and eluding the authorities, Smernikov cannot escape the fact that his worldview is one of meaningless despair. Smernikov's two remaining brothers, Alyosha and Ivan Karamazov, learn of his crime and urge him to turn himself in to the authorities. In an important moment of confrontation, Smernikov discusses the atheist maxim with his half-brother and fellow atheist, Ivan Karamazov. We read, and I quote, "I don't need it at all, sir," said Smernikov haltingly, with a dismissive gesture. "At first, I thought that if I had some money, I could start all over again, either in Moscow or, better still, abroad. I got that idea, sir, mainly from 'everything is permitted.' It was you who taught me that, sir, because you used to say it a lot. Because if there is no eternal God, then there is no virtue and, what's more, absolutely no need for it. You really meant it, and that's what I reckoned. You worked it out all by yourself," Ivan smiled wryly. "With your guidance, sir. And now I suppose you believe in God, since you've decided not to keep the money." "No, sir, I don't believe." whispered Smernikov. The Brothers Karamazov, Part 4, Book 11, Chapter 8. Shortly after that confrontation, Smernikov would commit suicide, and Ivan Karamazov, also an atheist, would go insane after having a theological discussion with none other than the devil. Young Alyosha Karamazov is left amidst the atheist wreckage, unable to prove his brother Dmitri's innocence. Some have wondered if Dostoyevsky may have been a 19th century prophet. He was clearly trying to warn Russia of the dangers of atheism. Consider a comparison between atheist dictator Joseph Stalin and the character Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment. Both sought to eliminate human beings in order to accomplish what they thought was the greater good. Both denied the biblical morality of the Ten Commandments. Both decided they were the ultimate reference point concerning ethics and morality. Both men thought their actions would result in a type of paradise for those they loved. Yet the consequentialism of both ended in the horror of massacre and suffering. What the fictional character Raskolnikov did to the few fictional characters surrounding him in the pages of Dostoyevsky's novel, Stalin was able to do to millions of actual people in Russia during the 20th century. Alister McGrath writes, and I quote, "While Dostoyevsky's writings give little hint of the horrendous evils to come in the Stalinist era, there can be little doubt that he was trying to draw the attention of his readers to the darker side of atheism. Atheism, it has often been argued, was a necessary precondition for the Stalinist era, yet many Russian bourgeois liberals of the 1870s saw atheism as a liberator that would free their culture from the oppressive political absolutism and moral conservatism of their age. Dostoyevsky, with the true vision of a prophet, foresaw something much more disturbing. To remove God is to eliminate the final restraint on human brutality." End quote. The Twilight of Atheism, Chapter 6, pages 148 through 149. Atheism cannot be the foundation of society, for it always leads to nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless, without purpose, and vacuous of objective moral value. Atheistic nations, such as the Soviet Union, have collapsed while trying to stand on the flimsy foundation of nihilism. This has not deterred modern atheist authors from reintroducing their nihilism back into our modern society. Richard Dawkins, for example, announces that he does not believe in teleology in his best-selling book, The God Delusion. He writes, and I quote, "The assignment of purpose to everything is called teleology. Children are native teleologists, and many never grow out of it." End quote. The God Delusion, Chapter 5, page 210. He goes on to claim there is no objective morality when he states, and I quote, "Fortunately, however, morals do not have to be absolute." End quote. The God Delusion, Chapter 5, page 265. By the end of the book, Dawkins is singing the ancient song of pragmatism. He writes, and I quote, "The truly adult view, by contrast, is that our life is as meaningful, as full, and as wonderful as we choose to make it." End quote. The God Delusion, Chapter 10, page 404. The obvious meaning of Dawkins' pragmatic assertion is that life can mean anything to anyone. However, if life can mean anything, then it really means nothing. If something is to have any meaning at all, then it must not only mean something, but it must also not mean something. Dawkins, despite his wording, cannot escape the abysmal pit of nihilism. So atheism fails to provide a suitable and meaningful foundation for society. In the next video, we will see if biblical Christianity can do any better.